Did dragons really exist? Stories about dragons can be found in many cultures and civilizations all over the world. In the West, they usually look like winged dinosaurs breathing fire and face the heroes of many legends as an enemy. In the East, on the other hand, they are often personified natural forces and are usually depicted with an elongated, snake-like body. But whether in America, Europe, or Asia, dragons can be found everywhere. Depending on the legend, the supernatural beings have different characteristics. In some, they are animals, and in others, they act like humans and can even speak. Some dragons live in palaces, and others sleep in dark caves or on a mountain of gold. Although there are legends speaking of dragons that are wise and good, most of them are only granted to play the role of the supernatural enemy of a hero. For example, in the Song of the Nibelungs, in which Siegfried defeats the lindworm Fafnir. Most of the time, dragons are huge, scary monsters that cause fear and horror in people. For this reason, pictures of dragons were even used on the standards of the Romans. Persian soldiers, on the other hand, carried huge dragon heads with them when they went to battle, and even Vikings decorated their ships with the heads of the winged monsters. But where do dragons actually come from? If they are mentioned in so many different cultures, there must be a reason, right? Unfortunately, no one really knows where the stories about the winged creatures originated, but the fearsome animals were even described by the ancient Greeks and Sumerians. With the spread of the Christian faith, the belief in dragons did as well. In fact, even the biblical monster Leviathan has some dragon-like characteristics, and so, the giant animals were increasingly associated with the evil side of things, that is, Satan. Christian legends, such as that of St. George the Dragon Killer and many others, made dragons an integral part of culture. Early finds of dinosaur bones would certainly have reinforced the belief in dragons at a time when no one knew about these animals that once roamed the earth yet. Thinking they were dragon remains is something the people back then can't really be blamed for. Since dinosaurs are the predecessors of birds, their bones have certain similarities with them. So it wouldn't be unlikely that people who found these bones or footprints thousands of years ago might have made up stories of flying monsters due to them. This could be one plausible theory how all the legends of dragons came about. After all, like many of these legends mention of dragon remains, dinosaur bones can be found all over the world as well. Of course, hardly anyone believes in real dragons these days. In times when almost everyone has access to cell phones with cameras and satellites from space can take pictures of the Earth, it's difficult to imagine that giant flying lizards could have simply been overlooked. But what if dragons actually became extinct, just like dinosaurs? Let's see if the existence of dragons could have been possible in our world. There are countless different dragon versions, from small ones to giant monsters many kilometers tall. Monsters this huge, of course, would not be viable on Earth because they would be crushed by their own weight and would never find enough food, so we don't really need to look any further into them. Medium-sized dragons, like those in Game of Thrones, would most likely have more than a few problems flying as well, because their bodies would be far too large and heavy. Little dragons, on the other hand, could have existed, at least theoretically. The largest flying creature we know of was the Quetzalcoatlus, a pterodactyl with a wingspan of 13 meters. Despite its size, it was still able to fly thanks to its gigantic wings. On top of that, its relatively small body was very light due to its hollow bones. The same could have been true for dragons. Fire breathing is a bit more difficult. Realistically speaking, fire would simply be an incredibly impractical weapon, and therefore evolution would most likely not have allowed creatures using it to prevail. For example, fire is very difficult to control, especially if it comes from your own mouth. A strong headwind and the whole thing backfires. Forest fires would also be a big problem. In many areas, a small match is enough to set fire to a huge forest, simply because the area is so incredibly dry. A few fire-breathing dragons would therefore have destroyed vast territories in no time, and with them, all their prey animals. Only in somewhat colder or wetter regions would the fire-breathing not have ended in a catastrophe. But even though it is very impractical, fire-breathing would actually be possible. After all, Brachynae beetles do something very similar. Due to the various chemicals reacting a certain way when mixed together, these small beetles are able to fire hot caustic gas at their enemies with a temperature of 100 degrees Celsius. Just like these beetles, dragons could have also produced various chemicals in their bodies that are harmless by themselves, but that create a flame when mixed together. Or they could have produced diphosphane that ignites when exposed to air. Another possibility is that, instead of farting, they could have exhaled the same methane gas that cows and humans produce. In this case, the whole fire breathing would basically be like lighting a fart. The only challenge would then be to generate a spark. For example, some birds eat stones to help their digestion. If dragons did the same, minerals could have built up in their mouth, which could have caused a spark when they ground their teeth that would, in turn, ignite the emitted gas. If the dragon then breathed out the fire and paid attention to the wind, it might even have managed not to burn itself. For its own protection, it could have also developed heat-resistant body characteristics. The Saharan silver ant, for example, has small reflective hairs that dissipate the heat. In addition, it also produces heat shock proteins that allow a significantly higher body temperature without being damaged. A dragon that is capable of producing flames would probably develop certain protective mechanisms over the years as well. A dragon's scale armor is probably also easier to imagine than you might think. Nature creates the most incredible materials that are both light and resistant. A great example of this is spider silk, which is stronger than steel or the keratin that protects pangolins. That dragons have existed on Earth is actually possible, at least in theory. They were probably smaller and significantly less bulky than in your typical movies or series, but it is a possibility. With hollow bones that can be filled with methane, which is even lighter than air, it would even have been possible to reduce their weight to such an extent that the animals could have risen into the air. Thanks to chemical reactions, they might also have generated fire. And with extra large wings, they could have glided through the air like a flying dinosaur. Even though this means that the existence of dragons is truly possible, as of yet, no evidence has been found that they once roamed the Earth. However, there are some animals that look extremely similar to dragons and may even have played a role in the creation of the myths. One of these animals is the Komodo dragon that even shares a name with them. Although this lizard cannot breathe fire, it produces a venom that prevents blood clotting. With a maximum size of 3 meters and a weight of more than 80 kilograms, these animals can be far from harmless. But there are more dragon-like animals that really exist. For example, the giant girdled lizard, which doesn't have the wings of a dragon, but the typical scales. With a maximum size of 40 centimeters, it is significantly smaller than the dragons in the legends. In the next video, we'll talk a bit more about this animal and other dragons that really exist. One of the main reasons why some people still believe in dragons today are the sightings that took place in the 20th and 21st century. In 2003, a dragon was seen in Japan by a teacher near Osaka. The creature became known as Neko Hibatori and has not appeared anywhere else since. There are many more reports from people who have allegedly seen a dragon. Some of them even took pictures or filmed a video. Maybe we'll take a closer look at them in one of the next videos. Another explanation why dragons are rarely seen and why there's no evidence of their existence is that they are supernatural beings that are only seen when they want it or when people believe in them. Just like the elves in Berserk. Similar to this story, the existence of dragons could also be explained with multiple dimensions. In this case, the beings of another dimension might look at us from above, similar to us looking at a sheet of paper on a table. This would explain why we don't notice them, because this other dimension is imperceptible to us, just like the third dimension in a two-dimensional space. Since these theories are definitely a stretch, we don't need to dwell on them for too long. After all, a similar explanation could be used for pretty much everything, from the Yeti to chupacabras. What do you think? Do you believe that dragons could have existed on Earth? Or are they just a product of people's fantasies that may have come across some dinosaur bones or footprints and tried to make sense of all this? Write it in the comments. I hope you liked this video. Until next time, bye!